as Randy explained and showed in the highway to hell, that there are lots and lots of pieces of the service delivery that need to be thought about to come together for customers. That, hold on one second. And that when you do design thinking, you're looking at very tangible touch points with customers. That often when we think about service design, it sounds sort of squishy and fuzzy and like, how do you design a service? And there are ways that you will learn that will allow you to see exactly where the touch points are so that you can design for the best of those to happen. The other thing that human-centered design does is it starts with this question of how might we. How implies that we're going to do something. It's not can we, will we, should we. The word might is a mighty word. It really reduces commitment. We're not saying how can we do this, how should we do it. We're throwing our hands up in the air and saying how might we do it. What are all the different ways? Let's not think about constraints at first. Let's think about possibilities. And we implies that we're doing something together. That this is a team sport. That often when we think about innovation, we think about the nutty professor alone in his lab, and there's so much research that shows that innovation comes from diverse groups of people coming together, spending lots and lots of time failing, and then coming up with something that will work. Most of the time, people's work kind of looks like this. You go up, and then you have a little setback, and then you do something else, and then you have a setback, but it's a relatively linear line, and particularly for those of us who work in government programs. But human-centered design is more like this. It's a complicated, messy process in which you iterate, you come back, you have an idea, you try it out, you test it out with your customers. It's messy and complicated and actually a lot more fun than the straight line looks like. So the first step along the way is really the empathy and hearing part of the human-centered design process. And some of you have seen this slide before, for those of you who've heard me talk, but there are lots of different ways to empathize with our customers. This first picture is a 85-year-old woman who was asked what her experience was with pill bottles because the design firm IDEO was inventing some new ones. She said her experience was fine, and they thought that was peculiar, so they asked if they could follow her around. And when she got her pill bottles, she went home, she went over to her deli meat slicer that was on the kitchen counter and sliced the top of her pill bottle off, and then poured her pills into baby food jars. So one of the lessons here is that you can't just ask people, how was your experience in class today? They might say fine. They might say fine because they're just trying to get out the door. They might say fine because they don't want to hurt your feelings. But it might not be fine. So spending a little extra time observing and really understanding what's going on with people is important. Engaging with people, not just a focus group, but a set of questions. Some design thinkers actually go into people's homes and follow them around for a day or ask them to keep a journal of what happens over the course of a day. And then immersing yourself in the environments that your students are in. This is a video or a photograph of a guy who videoed his experience in a hospital. And when they looked at the video at the end, they discovered that really all he was doing was looking at crappy ceiling tiles. And that helped them redesign the customer experience through the eyes of the customer and not through their own eyes. This is another example of how to empathize with customers. This is an example of a journey map. What happens when someone walks through the door? What happens even before that when someone becomes aware? When you think about it, many of the students that you work with are brave people who've taken a step to walk into a classroom and learn something that's scary and new. What happened? What happened in their life that made them aware that this was something that was important to do for them? What was their motivation? Was it about their children? Was it about their job? Was it about communicating with their family? So this is a way by writing down all those tangible moments that people have, starting from awareness all the way through the process, that allows you to see where people have pain points and where there are opportunities to innovate and make things better. This is a photograph of a guy named David who said that he just copied his friends' resumes because he didn't know how to write one. And we have our own mental models. Even though I'm obsessed with human-centered design, when I saw this quote, my first thought is, oh, we just need to hook them up to resume writing workshops. My mental model about what we offered to our clients got in the way of really understanding what David needed. These are a couple of quotes that came from the Verdugo Workforce Board, who worked with the ABG and adult ed partners in their community. And these are some quotes about what happened at the beginning of their process, which I really loved. I mean, partners coming together and synthesizing their research and really improved the level of trust and compassion across partners. And the other quote, which I loved, was, by really openly discussing what happened with clients, even in your own programs, people found that they were not only frustrated, but even embarrassed about some of their own practices. We don't often just take the time to step back and look what's happening. We go into a job, someone tells us what to do and how it's been done for 20 years, we do it and don't step back and really try to understand the experience of our customers. And sometimes that's a hard thing to actually listen to. There was a woman in Tennessee who sat in the lobby of a neighbor's nonprofit for 2 days. And at the end of the second day, she came back and she just started crying. She said, she thought that her organization had been seen as a real help in the community. And in fact, they were seen as gatekeepers of services. Some people got into services, some people didn't. It was very mysterious. It wasn't transparent. This is sometimes a really sobering part of the process, but really, really important if you want to innovate for your customers. And I love this last one. This is also a quote from Verdugo. Observing customers going through the entrance and the intake process and witnessing firsthand the many inconveniences that impact sessional services was a real enlightenment for everyone involved. So once you've really understood your customers, you've observed, you've immersed yourself, you've done interviews, and by the way, this class teaches you how to do all this. Each step of the way, there are worksheets, there are assignments, there are very structured ways in which you're learning how to do it. Your team comes back together again to really try to understand what they've learned and to gain some insight together into what they might want to start working on and improving. In the case of David, the insight that the team had was they didn't need to hook David up to a resume writing class, or in fact, any of the young people coming into their offices. They just needed to give young people some templates that they could copy. That's a much better solution to his problem than the one that we had been offering him. This is also from the Verdugo team. They found a couple of issues when they came back together after their research. For one thing, that the geographic of the location of the career center, the one-stop center, wasn't great. Young people weren't willing to take the bus. The hours weren't good enough for lots of different people who wanted to come in. So this kind of information is what you come back with and then becomes the seeds of ways that you can start asking how might we questions about innovation. This is another one that I really love. This is an example of a team in Contra Costa County who worked with formerly incarcerated people who actually get released with wearing these paper suits. And the quote from one of their interviewees was, they get a bunch of flyers. I mean, they're sitting in prison and all these different well-meaning people come in and hand them a bunch of paper flyers. But they want to actually be ready to have appointments ready to go when they get out. Just really great insights that you only get by talking to your own customers. I also love this one. This is from a youth program. People who came back and shared laughs and stories because they realized they weren't as hip as they thought they were. One insight, for example, is that young people who are particularly in their 20s don't want to be referred to as youth, and yet in WIOA we often brand our programs as youth programs. And finally, and this is a project that we did with long-term unemployed. There were some insights just about how people's emotional states matter when they walk through the door. It's certainly the same with your students as it is with people walking into a one-stop. Some people are stalled. They've sent out tons of resumes, or they've tried a bunch of different programs already and it hasn't worked and they don't know what to do yet. Some people, they come in looking for a job, but in fact, it's not really a job they need. They need money because they're about to lose their house or their apartment or their car. Those people are really, really different than people who may have lost their job because their industry is fainting and going away. And you need to treat those people differently. We tend to treat them all, we give them all a one-size-fits-all workshop, and that isn't really human-centered design. That's providing a service that is more convenient for us and doesn't really take the customer into account. So the next step along the way, again, as part of this class, is brainstorming lots and lots of different ideas, coming up with lots of how might we questions, and trying to come up with some ideas that could get actually prototyped and tested. I love this quote. We want to simplify the invoice process so Gloria can take a vacation. Sometimes your motivation for innovating can be very self-centered, perhaps, but works just as well. And then finally, in this process, you move to prototyping and testing, coming up with some ideas that you think might work, trying them out, try them out super quick and super fast. It's something we're not very good at in government. When we prototype and bring partners together and say, let's look at this, it's sort of scrappy and rough and not polished, people see possibilities and they see potential. When we bring people something that's polished, we tend to see flaws. For example, just think about the difference, how it feels if you get brought into a room with a bunch of other people and together you say, all right, let's figure out together how we're going to support our shared customers. And then we'll write an MOU that kind of reflects that, as opposed to one of your partners coming in with a neatly typed 8-page document that says MOU at the top and you're asked to sign it. Those are two different, very different experiences, and it's the same here. You want to start scrappy and rough to see potential and possibility. And sometimes prototyping actually allows you to see things that are going on that you're not even willing to look at. This is a prototype of a current system in which essentially people ended up acting out soldiers pointing guns at each other and fighting with each other because they were all trying to protect their own employers and not share an employer pool across the community. So prototyping is a way sometimes to have some insights that you might not have otherwise. I love this prototype. You don't need to read it now. We'll have this video or this PowerPoint available for you later on, but a prototype on the right is an existing document about Medicare policies, and afterwards we're going to take 2 steps to look at this and we'll let you know the result. I think you might agree with me that the prototype of after is probably a better solution. And prototyping can be as simple as using a piece of paper as opposed to going ahead and making something that takes a whole lot of time and energy. This is a prototype that was done up in Oregon. I really love this one up in the left-hand corner. When people walked in the door of the Career Center, the first thing they saw was a red hand with a stop sign. And just a little prototype of saying, wait, you're up next, with a smiley face. When put on top of that red hand, actually changed customers' experiences. And when we talk about innovation and human-centered design, we're not necessarily talking about big, giant changes to a system that's going to take tons of money and tons of time. It's lots and lots and lots of little prototypes and tests that will make the experience of your students better for them. Really like this set of advertisements. These were done as a result of some human-centered design work down in Southern California, in which they had a program that allowed them to pay employers to hire young people as interns. And they realized that not only were they not getting very much take-up from employers, but they also weren't getting take-up from employers who really cared about young people, they were getting take up from employers who cared more about getting reimbursed for a certain number of months of wages. And so this is a ad campaign that was done as a result of using human-centered design, but that really wanted to focus on recruiting employers who shared the same values that the Workforce Board did, so that their students had much more chance of success. So Edgar, for example, said, you gave me a job, a place to go after school, someone to look up to, a chance to thank you. You know, that ad generated about 111% increase in the number of employers who were calling the One Stop to get student interns. And they were also employers who cared about wanting to make a difference in their community for young people. And so obviously Edgar is going to have much more of a chance of success in that job, as opposed to an employer who is just trying to get some government money. So design thinking doesn't end. It's a process that once the light bulb goes on is really hard to turn off again. And we have, as Randy said, when I was at the Department of Labor, we trained about 225 teams across the country, over 2,000 people. And many of those people, including about 6 teams in California that included their ABG partners in the design process, really started to use this. The class wasn't the end, the class was really the beginning of the process. So I'm going to talk about what are the steps that you would need to take if you'd like to participate in this training that starts in May. First, there's some prep work. You have to develop a design team. I'll talk more about what the design team looks like in just a moment. You also want to, I wouldn't say warn your customers, but you want to talk to your customers about what's going on, the fact that you're going to be doing some experimentation and testing some things. You're going to want to make sure that the staff in your agencies are also at least participate in understanding and learning about what's going on in this initiative, so that it's not just the cool kids off in the corner doing really great stuff with Play-Doh and laughing a lot, but that it's understanding that this is a prototype that, if it works, will be rolled out to more people in the agency, and also stakeholder groups who you may want to include in your design team. This is an example of a Workforce Board that actually literally put this, pardon my dust, kind of a poster up in their office saying, we're going to be trying out some new processes and programs designed to make your experience better, so please be patient. So putting posters up, sending emails out to claimants or claimant students, and having people who are actually designated as ambassadors of change, who are going out and talking to people in the community, are all things that will make this a smoother ride. So this is how the course works. As Randy said, this is a MOOC. This is a course that is designed by IDEO, the design firm. I'll talk a little bit more about the partners in that process. But thousands of people may be taking the course along with you across the world. We have a special arrangement with Acumen, the company that actually launches this class for us and others, so that we will have a special way to do registration with them. We'll have our own room on the website where only our teams can go. We are going to issue 3 challenges I'll talk about in a minute, and each team will pick one of those challenges, and you'll use those challenges in order to go through the class. So the class has some generic challenges that you can take as practice, but what we found when I did this at the Department of Labor, that actually working on real world challenges totally changes the experience. And now not only are you learning a methodology, a way to make improvements in your organization and your services, but you actually have products at the end that you can prototype and test and implement. The course begins on May 9th, although we're going to actually ask for registrations to start on May 1st. We'll talk more about that later. But it's a 5-session class that lasts 9 weeks. So it's not a class that you sign on every Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock. It's video and reading that you do at your own pace. and then your team gets together for somewhere between 4 and 6 hours a week to actually do the work. So there's introduction to human-centered design. There's a couple of weeks of inspiration where you're empathizing and learning about your customers, talking to your students, observing them, embedding yourselves with them. There's a couple of weeks for coming up with ideas and synthesizing what you've learned. And then there's an implementation phase where you're testing and prototyping. So there's a 9, this particular chart shows 7 weeks, but there's another 2 weeks that's kind of in there as flex time for teams to use. This is what you're going to learn, some of the many things. Part of it is just a mindset. Just like Randy said, sometimes we box ourselves in with our own ideas about what's possible or what's allowed or what the law says or the rules. And there are many things that we can do that really have nothing to do with the law or the regulations. They have to do with providing better services to customers, and that's really a mindset shift. You learn how to experiment with low risk so that you're not coming up with a big giant project and rolling it out a year later and not ever having tried it and discovering that some key piece of it doesn't really work. You're going to identify patterns and opportunities to continue to improve. This is really, it's a continuous improvement process. You'll get some inspiration from other students in this class on how to approach challenges differently. And then you get hands-on experience actually doing the work. We would suggest, if you are really interested in taking this class, that you set aside 5 to 7 hours is a little on the high end, but at least 4 to 5 hours a week or per session. In other words, 4 to 5 hours over the course of 9 weeks. And we would suggest, based on experience, that at the very beginning, if you decide you want to do this, the very beginning, you set up your meetings, you put them on the calendars, and that time is just for you, and you have to stick to it. If you're going to be working with customers in places that you don't ordinarily go, in other words, if it's not just your own set of students, you want to make sure that you're getting access to your customers right up front. And you also have to remember to be flexible, that this is, remember that chart I showed you at the beginning, it's not a straight line, there are lots and lots of little curlicues along the way. So there's 3 organizations that you're going to hear about. IDEO is actually the company that has branded and invented human-centered design, which is used widely around the world. Acumen is the organization that has taken the IDEO class and turned it into very good, interactive, high production value sessions. NovoEd is the technical platform that this stuff runs on. So you will see, as you will start to register for this class, all of these different names show up, and we want to make it as least confusing as possible. As I said before, there's no set class schedule. You're free to read the material, look at the videos, do all your prep work. Many people did that outside of work hours, and then come together with your team to process information and produce products. And if you go through the whole class and submit all of your homework, you will be awarded a certificate of completion, which in fact many of the people who've gone through this class already have added to their resume as a skill that they've learned that can be applied in lots of different ways. This is the timeline. We are having a launch webinar today, and for those of you who are super interested, we would want you to form your design team, come up with a team leader, and identify one of the challenges that you're going to work on. I'll show those to you in a minute. Registration for the class starts on May 1st, and this is a very important point. Anyone can go and take this class. You could go right now and register for the class and start. But if you'd like to have the support of the ABG technical assistance providers, which includes coaching, not only from some of us, but also from Acumen as part of a special arrangement we've made with them. You're going to want to register your team through the process that we have put in place. The class, again, starts May 9th. And again, you could probably wait a week, but I wouldn't wait too long, because one of the concerns that some teams had when they started was they couldn't get going fast enough, and then they got too far behind in the class and had to drop out. So you take the course in May and June. There will be coaching, there'll be webinars and other ways to keep you connected to each other and to us. The course concludes on July 10th. And then in July and August, we're going to want you to prototype and test some of the ideas that you've come up with. And in September, we're going to have an amazing learning exchange and celebration somewhere in California. Yet to be defined, but trust us, it's going to be really amazing. Very specifically, you want to build your design team. If your team's too small, if you only have a couple people, you're just not going to have the benefits of a multidisciplinary team. One of our teams that was working on homeless youth issues had their security guard as part of their team, because he saw more people walk into their office than anyone else. And in fact, as a result of having that security guard on their design team, they realized that homeless people who were walking through the door had no place to leave their stuff, so they'd walk in and turn around and walk out again. So having that security guard on was a really great advantage. Other teams who were focused on a particular set of students actually had some of their students involved in the design team with them and included them as equal partners. So having those different backgrounds or different skills is really important. In the case of this project, we would strongly encourage that there are K-12, adult ed, and community college people. The whole point of this, as Randy said at the beginning, was to try to build stronger partnerships across all of our programs and make them work better for our shared customers. And you probably want to have some management and also some frontline staff who are participating on your team. So here are the 3 challenges that we have. And again, we'll send all of this material out for you. You can look at it more later. One is, how might we increase access to and retention of students in adult education? How might we help more students transition into post-secondary education? And how might we collectively strengthen career pipelines into higher wage employment? So those are starting places for challenges. I would say that almost everyone who went through the classes in the last couple of years during their empathy and insight phase actually refined their how might we questions that in ways that really focus more specifically on who their particular students or customers were. And so probably no one will end up answering any of these exactly, but they're a place to start, and we want each team to pick one of these as a starting point. So after this webinar today, if you're interested, we want you to pick a team leader, and we want the team leader to email Jimmy Gilroy, our fabulous helper on this project, within a week. And once you've done that, then you'll receive an email with more information about how to actually register. And also, if we get a huge uptake of people and consortia, we may want to have a call with you, or in some way talk to you a little bit more about what you're wanting to work on, because the arrangements that we have right now and just the level of support that we can give is really only for 3, 4, 5 consortia. Randy's laughing at me. The number keeps moving, but we want this first experience to be really great for the participants, which means we want to have enough support for you so that we can really test this. And then we want to do a much larger version in September, assuming that this all works, which we think it will. We will have weekly communication with coaches to answer questions, to brainstorm, to bug you if you haven't done your homework, to maybe to connect you up if there are two consortia who are working on the same challenge. Maybe have a call between the two of you so that you can share what you're learning and information and ideas that you have. We'll probably end up with a video call or two with Acumen, who can help you both with the technical parts of accessing the class as well as just people who are very familiar with and expert in design thinking. We also have some suggested supplies. This is the fun part of the class. If you're not a shareholder in 3M, you might want to go out and buy some stock. Post-it notes, Sharpies, paper, prototyping supplies, and then this is a very visual process, and as you can see with these pictures I've been showing you, there's a lot of homework that requires documenting the work you've been doing and uploading it into our shared website space. So here's some of the outcomes. One, I think more than anything else, we want services that are really designed for students that better meet their needs. And I think that's really at the heart of this work. I started this process when we were first implementing the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act and felt like we really wanted to keep innovation in the implementation. And I think it's the same for ABG, that we want this to be transformative and not just like, okay, let's write the 3-year plan and be over with it. We think that service design happening in a collaborative way with all the stakeholders participating, we've seen lots and lots of evidence that it creates trust between partners in ways that we haven't seen. We think that all educators, administrators, policymakers, deans, superintendents will have a much better understanding of who the customer is as a result of some of this work and being able to publicize this work and get it out into the world. And that will be really helpful for you. And that will provide a capacity for ongoing process improvement and using design thinking all the time. For the customers, as I said, this touches all of these parts of the customer interaction, communication, digital interactions, physical spaces and services, stakeholders coming together. You know, my experience is that you all of us who work in government, we want to do better. We want to provide better services to our customers, and we just don't know how to get started sometimes. And this is a very structured way to learn some skills to do things differently. And finally, really a shift in mindset, certainly in the Department of Labor. I can't speak to ABG, but just this notion that we have to do everything for compliance reasons as opposed to focusing on customer outcomes. There can be a real shift as a result of this process. And I'll end with this quote, which was again back to Verdugo. The open and honest communication as a result of working together increase the level of partner engagement and team building in ways that just wouldn't happen any other way. And I'd also end by saying that really to a person, the people who've participated in going through this class and learning human-centered design have said to me that it's given them a new sense of energy and commitment to the work, that people come into this work wanting to help people. And sometimes we get lost along the way with the paperwork or the admin and all of the bureaucratic hullabaloo that goes along with working in a school or a college. And that this allows people to reconnect to their love of being a teacher and a public servant. So with that, I believe that's my last slide. Let's see whether you have any questions. And so if you have questions, can you put them, just type them in the chat box.
We will do the and we will go back through the question list if we don't get to your question and kind of identify things that we can send out potentially in an email to folks. If we can.
I think the other thing I'd like to ask is, based on what you've just heard, how likely are you to want to actually, I don't know whether we've scared you off or enticed you. We'd love to hear in the chat, how likely are you to want to sign up for this training that starts in May?
So we have a question. So there's a question about September. So September will be a process, what we described for May, with a little bit more lead time because we sort of made a decision to move forward with this fairly quickly. So you'll be looking for that, and what so we'll talk about more ahead of time on that. Oh, here come the questions. So we had a question about whether or not people needed to include their the names and email addresses of all their field team members, not in the initial email, but when you register, you will need to have contact information for everyone. Document will get back to you with the log on to actually get into the system once we have you registered. On a scale of 1 to 10, probably an 8. So I'm seeing some people responding to whether or not they want to do this. People saying they're going to share it with their consortium lead, their consortium folks, and get back to us. So there's a question about whether it's our idea to have teams without teachers. It is not our idea to have either teams with or without teachers specifically, I would say. I think so you could target this in different ways, right? There's a lot of leadership from your organizations. You could have key leaders go through this if the timing doesn't work to have faculty or instructors. So we're leaving it to you to really identify what's the best configuration of folks. We don't really control the timing in this case. So there was no way for us to kind of make it work for everybody. We had an opportunity and we just tried to jump on it. So we can share a copy of the PowerPoint. We need a way to make the file size manageable because currently it's like 60 gigabytes or something crazy. So we'll figure that and make it available in a file format that you can look at. So we have also recorded this. I'm going to just acknowledge that, and given my technical sort of finesse, I started the recording about 6 slides in, but you do get all of Virginia's slides and you miss my slides, which is probably fine because I was just sort of framing. And really the meat of this was sort of in her presentation. We don't know when registration is for the September class yet. It will be more in advance than this one is. People are working on EL civics plans. Once again, couldn't really control the timing. I think the idea was, because it's so hard to start things in a new academic year, that if we get some people going through this in this academic year and then build on this for next year, there will be more times to do this. That was one of the things we've really committed to figuring out how to make this available to a lot more folks next year. We are looking for those 3 or 4 very hardy consortia who think, and we've had several consortia who've kind of stepped up privately in the past few days that we think we really want to do this, and we think we'll be able to do it. So I love the PowerPoint. September sounds like a better time frame. So once again, May is not really designed to try and cover everybody. And we're going to be talking with AEBG leadership about how do we begin to layer this out so as many people as possible next year can get through this prior to the 3-year plan.
There's tons of good resources and background on human-centered design. We'll put together a list of 5 or 6 places you can go. In particular, we're interested in using human-centered design in government and education. So we'll put some resources together along with a way to share this PowerPoint. We may have to put it on Dropbox or a Google Drive and get it out to you that way because, again, the slides are so graphic heavy, but we'll get it out to you.
There is no cost to consortia for the training. So what we've done is Virginia and I basically kind of sat down and said, we need to do this and we're going to figure out how to handle it. And so that's, there's no cost. You don't need to budget anything, but it is a real tangible commitment of time. And so on the back end, because I know how it works, particularly if you do try and incentivize faculty, there probably could be some compensation involved there. That obviously would be a year end in terms of back end costs, cost for supplies and things like that. But for the actual training, the coaching, the support that we are providing, that is all available to you free.
There's a question about doing prototyping, gleaning the findings and including those in a regional plan. Is there time to do prototyping? I think the answer is absolutely yes. I think that's, Randy and I are both the kind of people that just want to jump in and do stuff anyway. So this is not going to be convenient for all of you right now, but I think getting a few of you to start this process. You're going to be prototyping as you're taking the class. It's the thing that I really love about this class is that it's not, I'm going to learn the theory and then I'm going to go out separately and do it. You're learning it. It's, you all know this, it's experiential learning. You're learning it, then you're doing something, then you're learning something new and you're building on what you've just learned and using that piece of information. So by the time you're done, you will have already prototyped and tested some things.
And that's just my own personal experience with doing projects like this in terms of rapid prototyping. And Peter Simon can speak to this. People talk about building new pathway programs and it takes months. Maybe we can do it next year, or it's going to take all this time. We have done this whole thing with a brand new pathway program in like 6 weeks. So there are ways you can jump in. So I think the part of this is to challenge yourself about what you believe is possible. To really begin to kind of move the needle, because then this becomes part of your routine and practice. We're going to try this out, we're going to run it out there, we're going to do it a little bit, and if it runs great, then we're going to retool it and then try it a different way. Learning how to do that and just allow yourself, even giving yourself permission.
You can, I said earlier, you can take this class, you can Google IDEO plus Acumen, human-centered design. The class is available. You can go online right now and register for it. You can go ahead and do that. It's free. One of the reasons that we're doing it this way is that we're leveraging this good free curriculum that's given 3 times a year. Our strong suggestion would be that you do this with a team in your community and you work on a real problem and you work through us, because it gives you coaching and some recognition and connection with others who are doing the same thing. And we're really trying to build a movement here. We're trying to build a movement of schools and colleges who are working together to make their services better for students. And I think this is I don't know how to say this exactly, except to say that we talk about innovation, we talk about continuous improvement, we talk about making things better for students, but we never just know what to do exactly. And this is a skill you can learn, just like you can learn anything else, and a discipline. And if you do it together with your colleagues and partners, there'll be so many more added benefits besides just learning the content.
I think we really want to see this build into a real community of practice. So whatever comes out of this, we want to share it widely amongst you. We want people to learn from each other, to see what kind of sort of really energy we can get around this as a kind of a core idea for how we do our work.
So there's a question, what's the website to register? If you disagree with my advice and want to go and want to go online directly and register for the course, you just Google IDEO plus Acumen human-centered design. You'll find the course. If you want to register through us in a way that we would suggest will be a better strategy, then you will be getting an email. Once you send an email to Jimmy, you'll be getting an email back in a week with information about how to register. No.
No?
Yeah. What else?
So are you talking? So someone has a question about the sign-up website. You're talking about the sign-up website for doing this on your own, or for doing it without? Thank you, Peter. So haven't seen, so no, we've got more time, or we can wrap. I'm not seeing a lot of new questions. People should feel free, because I know people have been getting emails from me as well. But like, reach out to Jimmy or reach out to me with questions. But if you think your consortium is interested, let Jimmy know, because he's going to be compiling the list of folks that we think are potential participants. And then we'll be working with him on that. If you have emailed me in the last 4 or 5 days, and there's a number of consortium have said, yes, we think we want to do this, I will be sharing your information, getting you on that list with Jimmy. I know who you are, and so we're not going to lose you in the queue somewhere. We don't, if we have to make choices, we actually don't know how we're going to do that yet. We haven't had that discussion, because this all started like literally 3 weeks ago. And so just getting to this point of having the webinar today and getting an agreement going with Acumen to do this, it just took everything we had. So we will, if there's a process or additional process in terms of going to help us make that selection, we will let you know what that is.
Say this one more time, beat a dead horse. If you go ahead and sign up right now on the Acumen website, you will be signed up to take the class. You will be not signed up to be part of this initiative, and you won't be getting coaching, and you won't be getting the other ancillary supports that we're planning on giving you in this first go round. So free to do it. It's a free class, but if you do it through us, there'll be other supports and information available.
But if that's everything, we may go ahead and call it there. So once again, we will make the webinar available. We will make the PowerPoint available. The webinar starts about 7 slides in. Just be aware of that. That's all on me. And then we will look forward to talking to people downstream about this for the first. And we'll try and let people know kind of what's going on with the training and how it's turned out, and maybe even kind of identify and kind of recognize which consortia are participating. One thing to be aware of, that over the weekend, we were contacted by at least 4 or 5 consortia who either went through trainings with their local workforce board, who are already using human-centered design, and they had really, really great things to say about their experiences and how it really helped their consortia.
And just as a last request, as you're signing off, if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat box, just either glad I participated, or next time please change something, or other, just a little comment about whether this was a worthwhile hour for you. We would appreciate that too, so that next time we do it, we'll get better.
All right. We're going to mute ourselves, and we will leave things up for people to kind of type things into the chat box. So if you have other questions that come up for you, feel free to type them in there, and then we'll try and get back to them downstream. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.